So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Frank Eric, and I head up marketing programs here at FullQuota. Before we get underway, just a couple logistical issues. All of your lines are placed on mute. However, we do encourage your active participation, and there's a couple ways that can happen. In the control panel to your right, you'll see an area where you can ask questions. Feel free to ask those at any time, or you can also indicate a raised hand, and later in the session we'll unmute you so you have an opportunity to ask your questions. Our presenters today are Reed Overfelt, who is the CEO of FullQuota, as well as Skip Besthoff, who is the CEO of Inbound Writer. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Reed. And just one quick reminder, we'll be live tweeting today, and the hashtag is GetContentFound, which you can see on the screen. Reed?
Thanks, Frank, as always. Thank you, everyone, for, again, investing another hour with us this month. And again, Skip, thank you very much for spending the day with us. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. This is great.
So we don't normally bring somebody into our webinars who is going to talk about a product, but one of the most important tools that we have found in the 2.5 years that FullQuota has been doing inbound marketing is a product called Inbound Writer. And Skip and his team have created something that is so incredibly valuable to us that we're going to make it sort of, we're not going to talk about its product today, but we're going to talk about sort of the sort of core thing that product solves for us. And so, and for you as marketers today. And that really that issue we're trying to address is getting found. How do you actually create content that gets found by both your target buyer and is ranked by search engines today? And so, Skip, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes up front framing up sort of the problem that we're going to talk about today, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to sort of really talk about sort of the real issues and how we actually address them. Is that okay with you?
That sounds great.
Sounds good. Well, so first off, let's talk a little bit about what we're talking about today. So, for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been this debate about how many business-to-business buyers are actually using search to sort of initiate or even complete the sales process. And a number of organizations, including Arbitron and others, have actually gone back and have found a number, and it's starting to score in about almost all of them. And this number is for just business-to-business buyers only. 92% of your target buyers today are actually using search engines at the very beginning of the sales process to look for answers to problems that they're trying to address today. And that's huge. It means that Google and Bing and Yahoo are essentially the front door to your business today. And what it really means to you is that you need to be getting found in search and organic results in particular. And why organic results? Because 70% of all click-throughs are on organic results. And frankly, of the top 3 organic results, which I've outlined here on the slide, the vast majority of the actual purchases are going to go to that. In fact, 60% of all purchases go to the top 3 links in our organic search results today. And so where do you need to be in the top 3? So, but some of you have actually been on some of these presentations before, and the reality is that the idea of getting found today has gone to much more expansive. What I mean by that is it's not just about getting found in search engines today. It's about getting found in places where your target buyer is actually hanging out. And that might be in LinkedIn groups, for one. It might be on social channels. Depends on the market you're actually going into. Twitter and others. Twitter is largely an influence channel, and it's very likely that people who are influencing your target buyers are actually in and using Twitter today. It's also about getting found in industry-level sites where your buyer actually is actually hanging out already today, not coming to your blog, but going to some industry-level site. And what does it take to actually get found there? How do you do that? How do you actually show up in those sites today? And more importantly, mobile experiences. And the most important one and most relevant for today is mobile search. 3 out of 5 searches today are done by a mobile device. I'll repeat that. 3 out of 5 searches are done from a mobile device today, which means that a mobile search string is going to be the predominant way that people are going to be finding you today. And there's one thing you need to know about that, is that they're actually asking complete sentence questions, and they're semantic. I need to find X, Y, and Z. And very different from putting the keyword into a search engine and seeing what you get. Okay? And so it's transforming the way that you be thinking about getting found today. And so the reality of what I like to tell people is that you need to get found in Google. You need to get found in social networks where people are hanging out today. You need to get found on industry-level news and blog sites where your buyers actually participating and hanging out, and you need to get found in mobile experiences. And the choice is do that or don't and suffer the consequences. And if 92% of your target buyers today are actually finding you via a search engine or some other channel today, the reality is that saying that you might go out of business is not too far from the truth today. And so the question is, how do you pull that off? What do you need to do? I mean, what's really sort of involved with sort of getting found in general today? And what I always tell people is that it really boils down to one thing. It's about creating this really good content that is targeted at your target buyer persona, and it's stuff that they love and will read and will share and use in their daily business. Okay? And that would be the simple answer to the question. So the reality, though, is a bit different. You still need to create really good content today. But and one of the reasons I wanted Skip to join us today on the call is around the real realities of actually doing that. So Skip, you and I both know that you can write content, and that really probably doesn't quite accomplish what we want to do. And so let's talk a little bit about what the problem is. What's the real issue today? So I write this really good content, but that's not quite there. So tell me more. What do we need to do?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, thanks, Reed, and thanks for the kind words and the great introduction here. Yeah, I mean, we are working with web content every day, all day long, with a lot of our accounts who are very large publishers on the web. We work with large and small companies that are big brands, big publishers, folks like that. And the reality, which we're looking at on the slide right now, is most content does not perform. When you sit and look at the data, and right here, this is a very typical example we're looking at with our customers. It's typically only 1 or 2 pieces of content out of 10 that you publish that will actually drive traffic, engagement, social engagement, etc. And so these numbers here just show this. We're looking at, on the left-hand column here, a site that's got 86,000 pieces of content. And the top 425 pieces of content for that site, which represents 0.5% of their content, is driving over 1/3 of their organic traffic. All these numbers are cumulative. So if you look at the top 1% of their content, which is 880 individual pieces of content, that drives over 40% of their traffic, and so on and so forth. And so 17,000 pieces of content on this site out of the 86,000, which is 20%, drives about 80% of the traffic. And so that is a very typical case that we see, which means the inverse is also true, which is, in this case, 68,000 of the 86,000 pieces of content, 80% of that site's content drives a very small portion of their traffic. And that means that a lot of those investments in content are actually wasted investments. So we find that most content, when you actually look at the hard numbers, doesn't perform. And we also find that most people really don't understand why. And so what we talk about and what we see every day is there is a alphabet soup of different factors independent of how your content reads and what people necessarily think about it. There's a whole bunch of analytic factors under the hood that are really driving performance. And this is a complete alphabet soup. Some terms and concepts we find people are familiar with, some things people aren't familiar with. It's everything from a site's domain authority, a site's page authority, how different specific queries that people are putting into a search engine are matching your title, matching terms that you're using in your document, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we find that most people really don't necessarily understand this whole alphabet soup, and candidly, most people don't want to understand it. Back to your point, Reed, people want to produce really good content. People don't want to, on an individualized basis, become an expert in this gobbledygook of factors. And so what ends up happening in our experience is people are typically driving without headlights. The status quo today, we find, is people are, they know they need to publish good content. They're working hard at it. People are writing. They're probably trying to apply some type of best practice to their content, trying to do things that Folks in the content marketing industry and search SEO industry know our best practice about trying to select some keywords and trying to do proper title construction, and all that's really great. But at the end of the day, people are writing, they're publishing, maybe they're doing a little bit of optimization, and they're hoping for the best. And the probability that the best is going to materialize, that content's going to be successful, again, it's about 1 or 2 out of 10. And so what Inbound Writer's business is, and whether people are using Inbound Writer or not, to a certain degree isn't the point right here. It's that leverage predictive analytics, leverage different types of next generation technologies so that you can understand how to drive performance before you put pen to paper. The bad part of having this alphabet soup on the web is that there's a whole bunch of analytics that people might not understand. The good part of it is that with the right data and the right intelligence, you can start to understand how your content's going to perform before you actually even write it, which is a very powerful concept and something that we can take advantage of. And so looking at predictive analytics software specifically, this is what Inbound Writer does, and our software specifically has 3 functions. The first is what we call topic research, and so that's following on the notion of before you put pen to paper, before you write your content, do a little bit of research up front in terms of what you're going to write about and how that topic will likely perform with your website. And that little bit of research up front has huge bang for the buck. So that's one thing we support. Once you've decided that you want to write about a certain topic, you want to make sure you write that to the greatest degree possible. You want to make sure you take into account all the best practices to make sure that that content is going to be found and perform. And we absolutely help people do that with our application, with dynamic tips and suggestions and whatnot. And then the third thing we do, which we think is very important, is measurement. So it's very important to drive content quality, and what we do is we match that content quality to actual performance, so people can connect the dots and understand that when they use Inbound Writer, when they improve quality, they actually drive the performance metrics that matter to them, and that's a very important closed loop part of our process, part of our software. So flipping to the next slide.
So Skip, question. Just go back to that. So talk a little bit about why anyone would want to use a tool that helps them write content today. I mean, why do that? Why would you want to spend time even thinking about using something that actually allows you to sort of proactively write content that's optimized?
Absolutely. Well, and it's a great question, and the slide that's up right now will help me speak to it. The reason why you'd want to use a piece of software is, again, why would you want to drive at night without headlights when you can turn the headlights on? I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And so given the opportunity to understand how things you're writing are likely to perform gives you the ability up front to really make good, intelligent, and insightful decisions about where to allocate your dollars and get the maximum ROI for that. And so the way we think about it, Reed, is investing in content. It's like investing in any other asset. And what we want is we want our customers literally to create an asset, to invest in a piece of content that's going to drive not only an initial return in terms of traffic engagement and the metrics we all understand, but also a return over time. But in order to do that, in order to achieve that status of having your content truly being an asset, you need to leverage certain types of analytics and certain types of insight that a piece of software like Inbound Writer can help produce. So hopefully that answers your question.
Skip, it does. It was, I think, just to show the audience, we actually found Inbound Writer and Skip's team about a year ago, actually, or not, a little less than a year ago, and we were struggling because we thought we were writing really good content, and we thought, but yet it wasn't ranking well. And so we use the tool exclusively. All 40 of our writers are using the tool today. We've trained them to use it. We're actively using it. And what's interesting about it is that we realized that the nuances that we thought were important for Google weren't as important as we thought they were. And there were certain things that we knew were important that we identified as being more important. For example, authority. Authority of your website turns out to be one of the most critical things in terms of determining whether your content's going to perform or not. And so as we kind of looked at this whole thing, we were sitting there going, okay, well, we write all this content, and why isn't every piece of it now really sort of doing what we want it to do? And now today we can say, well, every piece we do write is intended and is at least focused on trying to perform the way we want it to, which is important actually. And I think for the marketers on the call, the key here again is we don't normally sort of talk about tools, but at the end of the day, we write close to 6,000 blog articles a year. And at the end of the day, you have to have a tool set that makes your job easier, but not only easier, but you get the right outcomes from it today. And so as we kind of go through this, the key thing is to think about it as like, okay, why would I use it? Because you'll write a piece of content that will get found, essentially. So that's Skip. Sorry, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, Reed, and many thanks for the endorsement and the kind words. And I think that before we even get into the specifics of what a piece of software like Inbound Writer can do, a lot of the conversations we typically have with customers and folks in the industry is also just about approach and to a certain degree about a mentality of how you want to start investing in content. Because to your point, a lot of people are investing in content. It's very important, not only from the perspective of that's really what the search engines are looking for, but it's also important from a competitive position because that's probably what your competitors are doing as well. So there's a lot of investment flowing into this space, which is great. But we find there are a couple different ways that people approach it, and it's a little bit of a quality versus a quantity debate, and we're going to show some data on that later in the presentation here. But on the quantity side, people who just are investing in content but creating a lot of content, not really focusing on quality and throwing it out there, they might see initial results, and that might kind of look like it's working initially, but over time, what we see time and time again is that does not work. That does not become a good quality and consistent source of traffic. And so as a result of that, what ends up happening is you're on the treadmill. You have to create more and more content, and that ultimately doesn't create assets that build value over time. Whereas if you're investing in quality, then it really yields those benefits. So if I could actually,
it's funny because this sort of the quantity thing is a holdover from what people used to tell marketers to go do, because it was Google was all about more quality. The more content you have, the better. The more content you have, the better. And a year ago with changes like Panda, it doesn't count anymore. It's all about
That's
quality.
Right. That's absolutely right. And there's something else I'd like to underscore, which is this market's changing. It's very dynamic. And actually, Reed, if I could ask you to go back one slide, there's something that's an important point here. Thank you. That I'd like to highlight, which is we are all playing in a zero-sum game. So back to the slides that Reed showed earlier about how many people are going to a website, how many people are using search as the entry point for an information discovery and a buying process. All that is absolutely true, but we're playing in a zero-sum game. There are only so many people who search on a given topic in a given month. So whether I'm looking for B2B, B2C, if I'm researching a vacation to the Caribbean, well, there are only so many people who are researching Caribbean vacations in any given month. And as marketers, we really don't have the ability to influence strongly how many people are doing those searches. So that's why it's a zero-sum game. So our job is to get the biggest share of those searches that we can and drive that traffic to our site. And that's why we talk about the winning formula here, because when you think about our jobs as playing in this zero-sum game, and we want to get as much traffic that's relevant to our business, there are three things that we have to do well. First is we have to be publishing content on topics that are highly popular. If I'm publishing about topics that for which there's a very narrow audience, I might speak to that audience, but if it doesn't move the needle for my site because it's so narrow and so small, again, I'm not going to see traffic and I'm not necessarily going to see results for that. Secondly is you need the ability to compete. And so because it's a zero-sum game, if you're a travel site and you're going after Caribbean vacations, well, your competitors are publishing on that as well. And Reed, what you said is absolutely true, which is things like the authority of your site, the strength of your site, have a huge impact on whether content will actually perform or not. And what we talk about and what we help our customers establish is where does your site sit in what we call the pecking order. And so if for a specific topic, Caribbean vacations, your site is a very strong, very authoritative site, and let's say it's in the top 10 or top 20 sites based upon a bunch of analytic factors that we understand, then the probability you're going to show up on page one is pretty good. There are never any guarantees. I don't think anyone can reverse engineer what the search engines are doing, but over time, statistically and with a high probability, if those analytic factors line up for you, you will consistently show up on page one. If those analytic factors don't line up for you, so you're lower in the pecking order, your site has a lower strength and authority than that of your competitors that are publishing on the same topic, then the probability that you're going to get on or near page one is much, much lower. And if that's the case, because most of the traffic, the vast majority of traffic is happening on sites that come up on page one, then you are not going to get performance. And so that's really the essence of what we drive with predictive analytics, which is we say before you put pen to paper, if I know that your site isn't going to be a top 20 site or a top 10 site talking about Caribbean vacations or whatever the topic is of your choosing, then it's actually not going to matter how well written the content is or not, because those laws of nature on the web are already you're already fighting against them. They're going to create so much friction for you that it's going to be very difficult for you just on the nature of your content to leapfrog. And so what you need to do is you need to understand that up front, and you need to have that insight, have that intelligence, and make some decisions before you put pen to paper so you can work around those constraints and ultimately achieve what you want to achieve.
Hey, Skip, I'm going to add a little bit to this too. This is probably the most important thing for the attendees of the webinar today to sort of understand is this idea of authority. And when your ability to compete is going to be based on your understanding of how to go improve your competitive, as Skip calls it, where you are in the pecking order. And what you need to understand is it's based on a series of things that are called off-page SEO. And they're things that you really don't control. And most importantly, but they're things that you can affect if you focus on them. So first of all is linking. Linking from quality sites. And so how would you address that? Well, you need to think about content that you can have syndicated to an authoritative blog that will link back to you. That's one way. There's also social context of your content today. How are you doing in terms of building out your social channels? Are those social channels using the content, and are people forwarding your content and sharing your content? That matters from a Google perspective for ranking. And so you have to be thoughtful about this idea of your ability to compete, because if you have a low authority site, anyone can write you the best piece of content in the world. It's not going to do anything for you today. And so you have to have a strategy in your overall content marketing program to be thinking about how do I build authority for my site over time. And it's the hardest thing you're going to do. But you can do it. You just have to have a plan to go do it. So.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, Reed. I think we see the exact same thing. We look at the market and the challenges in the same way, and what you're talking about in terms of the ability to compete is spot on. What we find is by building links and social engagement and a bunch of the off-page factors that Reed mentioned, yes, you can absolutely influence your ability to compete, but it takes time. And it takes a dedicated program to build that up. That's not going to happen overnight. While at the same time, people, have an editorial calendar and they need to get content out today, and they want that content to perform today. And so we think of things as a belt and suspenders approach, which is do all those off-page things that you need to do to drive your ability to compete. At the same time, understand where you are today and understand what your constraints are, and develop your content with knowledge of those constraints, so you can work around areas where you might be less strong, and you can exploit areas where you are very strong, and you can still achieve the maximum performance possible.
Reed, Skip, I have a question from the audience I'd like to address to both of you. A viewer, Nathan, asks, what types of tips do you have for optimizing local search in terms of content?
Skip, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, local search is, it's like any other type of search, I would say. I don't necessarily think there's a magic formula for that. I think with local search, if, for example, you're writing about maybe you're a small business and let's say you're a restaurant in New York City, specifically a restaurant in Soho, and you're getting content out there about wine tastings and different things you're doing on a regular basis, and you're trying to create a body of content to ultimately drive people to your restaurant. I think publishing good, consistent content with not only all the different aspects of your wine tastings and menus and whatnot, but consistently mentioning that location is very, very important, because consistently mentioning that location in a piece as well as across the body of content is going to get you indexed for that location. So that would be the main suggestion that I would provide, purely from a content basis, which is, and it's obviously, it's a fairly obvious suggestion, but it's an important one, because that consistency is going to help drive performance. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, a really important factor is, let's say, great, I'm in Soho and I'm going to put in Soho consistently into my content. Well, if there are 20 or 30 sites that are also mentioning Soho restaurants and different Soho things in their content, and you're not going to be able to compete on that, you need to know that. And so maybe you're not going to talk about Soho, but maybe you're going to talk about another term that reflects your location. Maybe it's Southern Manhattan, or maybe it's Soho on Broadway, or different types of things, so that you know that that term and can be specifically associated with your content and your site.
Yep. I'd add to the top of that, because that's exactly right. And I'd also remind you of a statistic. 3 out of 5 searches are done on a mobile device. And so for many of the companies that are on the call are on technology companies. So just think, I need to find, an accounting solution in, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Just as Skip said, your content needs to say those kinds of things, and think about that user experience. The other thing I'd admonish you to do is do the search on a mobile device yourself, and see what the outcomes look like, and then start using a tool that helps you make some sense out of what you're seeing. Because remember, that person's going to be walking around, they'll be sitting in the street in Minneapolis, and they're going to go, I need to get an accounting solution today, or I need to find X, Y, and Z. And so just remember, 1, that you're in a competitive world, and 2, you're probably getting found from a mobile experience. So, great question, though. Really good question.
Yep, keep them coming. Good. That's great.
You want to next slide? You ready?
Sure.
All right.
So, in terms of just drilling down on this concept of understanding popularity and understanding competitive strength, these are very specific factors that we build into our software. And so behind every term or topic that you might be looking to write about that can reside within Inbound Writer, we will point out these factors of search popularity and competitive strength. And so by being able to have very specific granularity and correlate these factors to whether your content is going to drive traffic or not, and drive engagement or not, it allows you to be very programmatic and very thoughtful about the decisions you make. And so these two factors specifically here, popularity and competitive strength, in our software, there's underlying data and analytics that we literally correlate to performance. And so for each one of our customers, we actually will do a study where we'll take their content and we'll take certain content we think is strong, we'll take certain content that we think isn't as strong, and we will show them in a correlation study that these factors specifically, optimizing for these factors specifically drive performance, and that's what makes the predictive analytics so powerful. And so part of the way we do that, which is unique to our technology, is we leverage a lot of data off the web. So we are a very data-hungry application. And so going back to the example that we mentioned earlier, if someone's creating content on Caribbean vacations, let's say, what our technology will do is we will go out and we'll find hundreds, sometimes thousands of pieces of content on the web specifically written about Caribbean vacations. And we have semantic and natural language processing technology that will go into each of the pieces of content that we can find. We'll understand not only the topics and terms that are embedded in that content, but we'll understand who is publishing that content. Who are the most prolific sites and publishers that are also publishing on the exact topic you want to publish on. And so by doing that, we understand who your competition is. And we can leverage at that point a lot of web analytics to understand, as Reed was saying, what's their strength and their authority relative to yours. And so that's just some of the underlying data we use that we try to intentionally obfuscate a lot of the very detailed analytics from our users, because we don't think people want to, again, be statisticians, if you will, when writing content. But all of that power behind the scenes is very important, and what you see on the current slide really highlights that. And so a typical type of research application that someone might use is on the right, and it just puts a lot of columns of data in front of writers and marketers and a bunch of factors that people really don't understand. And as a result of that, those tools either aren't really used because people don't like them and relate to them, or if they are used, they're typically not used properly. On the left, you see Inbound Writer. We try to obfuscate a lot of the details of what we're doing. We have a simple star rating type of system that we use, and the message to writers and marketers is use topics, use terms with more stars. The more stars, the better performance. It's just that simple. And because we are doing very deep semantic and natural language processing on a whole body of content on the web that's about the exact topic you want to publish on, we can extract very insightful suggestions for how you can improve your content based upon that deep analysis that we do.
Hey Skip, I'm going to, one sort of interjection. So I think we probably didn't do the audience a great service by not showing them kind of up front what the user experience is. So just so everyone knows, this tool is, our writer is actually sitting inside of this tool, and what they're seeing on the left-hand side of their screen is the Inbound Writer star rankings. And as they're writing the piece of content, it's actually scoring them, and it's suggesting keywords. And for the person that asks a question about local search, it's a great example where it has backcountry skiing, interesting keyword, what normally you would use to do that. But over on the left side, what you'll see that says Lake Placid, it's giving you, Whiteface Mountain. It's giving you specific places. And so what the writer would do is say, instead of using backcountry skiing, I'm going to actually go place Lake Placid into the content. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to get found for that specific location, for backcountry skiing. And so what we see is that all of our writers are actually writing content that actually is placing keywords that are far better than the ones we originally found in our keyword research over time. And that's the power of having a tool that allows you to write optimized content, that you're actually writing, as you're writing it, you're optimizing the set of keywords today. I'm going to move on to that.
Couldn't say it better myself, Reed. That's perfect. And actually, if you want, if you back up to slide 15, we actually do have a snapshot of the application, so we can show folks very quickly.
Let's keep rolling, Skip, because I want to make sure we have people have time for questions.
So all this sounds wonderful, and we're talking about this alphabet soup of competitive strength and popularity and all these things. So oftentimes our customers will say, okay, but Skip, what am I supposed to do? And so what we do is we try to keep things very simple and very actionable, and our tagline for this is green is good. And so we score each piece of content. You can see on the right-hand side of the chart here that we've got a red, yellow, green type of meter, and the punchline here is green is good. And so in our application, to have a quote-unquote green piece of content means by definition the content is written about a popular topic. It's a topic that your website can compete well on, meaning you're going to be higher in that pecking order versus lower, and it's well written, following best practices so that the content can be properly indexed by a search engine. So when you line those things up in our software, you can have a piece of content that's quote-unquote green. It's a high bar. Not every piece of content will get there, but by nature of having that high bar, when it does get into the green, we know statistically and with consistency that piece of content will perform. And so that's why all we say is green is good, and get more content into the green, and we help our customers do that in a consistent and programmatic way. And over time, if you start with 10% of your content as green and get it to 20 or 20% and get it to 30, you will see results. And those results are reflected here. So this is a actual case study. This is live customer data. And this is a customer that did a pretty scientific trial with us where they took 16 pieces of content as a control group, just set them aside, and took a very similar 16 pieces of content on their site, optimized it with Inbound Writer, got their scores into the green, and republished them on their site. And so what we see is the dark line up top is the control group, and over a period of February of this year to June, that control group went up by 25%, and the shaded green area represents the performance of the content that was optimized. So this single cohort of 16 optimized pieces of content starting in February rose 350% in the monthly page views that cohort of 16 drives. And so so you can see in the chart that in February there was an initial bump, and then that content kept rising. And so what that means is there's a 325% net gain in monthly page views that the optimized content yielded versus the control group. And so this is the type of performance that our application drives. This is the type of performance that's possible. And so what we do is we correlate very specifically getting content into the green with driving results like this. And when customers see that, they can understand how to consistently achieve this, and with this, their content really becomes an asset. And so we also show that on these next couple slides. So this is another very typical profile of how traffic might perform for a piece of content. In this case, one of our accounts took a piece of content that was actually read. And so this wasn't something that we deemed was a high quality piece of content. This was more of a quantity type of profile. And this piece of content was actually written by someone who is a pretty prolific writer, good cloud score and all the rest of it. This specific account promoted this piece of content with an email to their users, their customers. And so this content had an initial spike driven by this email campaign, driven by some social activity around it, but then you can see it immediately, it spiked and then it immediately flamed out. So this is the treadmill that folks will be on if they're not investing in quality. And so if with content like this, you're going to be on the treadmill. You're going to have to keep publishing that in order to maintain a steady traffic base. Whereas this is what a quality site piece of content might look like. So same initial traffic bump. This is a piece of content that we scored green or very high in quality. There was no promotion for this content, so this is almost exclusively organic traffic. And we had the exact same initial spike when it was published, but then you see this nice long tail. This piece of content is regularly driving, after the initial spike of 4,000 visits, it's regularly driving 1,000 visits a week. And so this piece of content has driven almost 30,000 visits since it was published in Q1. and it's continuing to drive roughly that 1,000 a week, whereas the content on the prior slide also had an initial spike, but ultimately only drove 6,000 pieces, so a 5x difference. This is what we talk about creating an asset. This is what we talk about of quality versus quantity, and this is how we work with accounts to help people achieve what they need to achieve.
You know, Skip, it's interesting because we always, one of the conversations we have with all of our clients plus prospects who are interested in working with FullQuota, it's this idea that you know, blog content, you know, is should be cheap and should be something you can do in volume, etc. It goes back to this kind of quantity versus quality thing. And we always remind them that you get what you pay for, right? And so writing a really good piece of content, the way that people need to think about it is that every blog post you do is essentially a new ad unit, and that ad unit has perpetual life. And you can see it in this graphic. It's like this is a perpetual piece of value that you've created. It took a little bit more time to write. It was probably a little bit more expensive to do, but look at the tail on this thing, and that's what you want to do. And so one of the key things is shifting this idea of it's all about writing a whole bunch of stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's good or not, just write it and get it out there, to writing some really good, high-quality pieces that actually will have this very sustained life. I bet you this piece of content right here that you're showing probably will have a sustained life for a year or more.
Yeah, the typical shelf life for a good quality piece of content we find is typically 1 to 2 years for a nice evergreen piece of content. Absolutely.
So
no, I think that's right.
Let's say they spend $350 on that piece of content. That's roughly, you know, what we would charge somebody for a good blog article today. $350 to get, you know, a couple thousand, you know, unique visitors per month for one piece of content. That's a great investment. You spend the same $350 in, you know, one, you know, Google ad campaign, and you probably spend it in an hour to do that.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is you spend that in an hour with Google or equivalent types of techniques, but the minute you stop writing checks, those programs turn off. And so that's where, if you look at the economics of content marketing, and if you look at the economics of quality content, the economics fly off the page because that traffic keeps on driving. You're 100% right. Sorry, go ahead.
I said blogs are the new ad unit. They are today, and except for these perpetual ads, which is an amazing thing. So go ahead, Skip. Let's wrap up.
So just wrapping up in terms of inbound writers' capabilities. So we really view what we provide to customers as a 360-degree process. We typically start out working with folks doing a content audit. So we baseline for our customers how their content is performing today. And then the way customers work with us is they can leverage us in a topic research and topic selection phase where, again, doing a little bit of work up front has big dividends on the back end of the process. And so doing a little bit of research before you put pen to paper, making sure that the topics you're going to write about are lining up with where you can perform, and then actually driving into the content creation process and optimizing that content from a search and engagement perspective and measuring results on the back end.
Skip, real quick.
Let's shift into.
Real quick, I have a couple folks asked a question and asked for clarification on the same issue, and that is, so you can take existing blog posts and run them through Inbound Writer to improve the aggregate score of your blog?
The answer is yes. So there are two ways you can think about using Inbound Writer. One is taking existing content and putting it into Inbound Writer and having Inbound Writer score that content and give tips and suggestions as to how to improve that content. The second way you can use Inbound Writer is with writing new content, and you can do the topic research and then write new content within Inbound Writer, or have that content inside your content management system or wherever you would normally write it, and you can have it flow into Inbound Writer to help improve that content. So we can work in either mode. The one thing I would point out is if you've got a pre-existing piece of content that's written about a topic where you might be lower in the pecking order, and there are certain things about that or it's not a popular topic, independent of the content, we might be able to help you with that. But candidly, If it's a topic that you're not going to be able to compete on, back to what Reed was saying about a bunch of off-page and other types of considerations, we may be able to improve it, we may not be able to improve it. And the reason why is because so much of the performance of that individual piece of content that you're going to write is locked in based upon the topic you choose and where you're going to publish it. But again, by leveraging us for existing as well as new content, we can help you understand that, understand where your constraints are, and try to get the maximum performance.
Just to follow up on what Skip your answer is that remember that if you've done a thoughtful job of identifying your target buyer and you understood what that target buyer's sort of business challenges are today, and you built a content map and calendar wrapped around those things and the topics that are of top of mind to them. If you've interviewed your buyer and you built this map of those topics, then you should have a topic that is going to be popular because it's front of mind for them today. And so it kind of goes back to a chicken and egg answer to this question, which is, if you've done all your homework up front, if you know your target buyer and you build a content model around that and your topic set around that buyer and the things they care about, then you'll have a topic area that actually will be popular today. And you have to remember that as just sort of, no tool is going to solve, not doing your homework up front on these things. The other thing I'll respond to with Skip's comment is that one of the easiest ways to learn how to use inbound writer as a writer is to actually take an existing piece of content and re-optimize it using that. Writing a wholly new original piece inside the tool can be a little daunting, actually. If you take an original piece, you kind of understand how the tool looks at and make suggestions on content. Makes it a lot easier for somebody to actually ramp up and start using it to write fully original pieces. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Reed. And I would say most of our customers that are leveraging inbound writer start by either taking existing content and putting it into inbound writer, or taking content that can be new content, but that's been written with their current process. So it's sitting in their CMS system or Microsoft Word or whatever platform people are using, and they'll put it into inbound writer right before they publish it. And so very typical high volume type of scenario for us is that content will flow from a CMS system. It'll flow into inbound writer. It can be done manually or via automated APIs. We'll give that content a score. It doesn't take a lot of time. People get their score. They get their dynamic tips and suggestions for how to improve their content. They do it. They save it. Content flows into their content management system, and it gets published and is in much better shape.
Yep. Good question, actually. Frank, do we have any good questions?
Yes, we do. Someone asked a question. They noted that you have a WordPress plugin, and they wanted to know a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so we do have a plugin in WordPress, and the way that works is people can download that plugin, and so Inbound Writer has a small application encapsulated in that plugin that mirrors our main software as a service cloud-based application. And so people can use that. They can get the same type of leverage out of that as with our main application. The one thing I would say is just because of the way WordPress works, sometimes it's harder for us to get certain data out of WordPress that it's just constraints that WordPress places on us and others. It's not specific to Inbound Writer. So when we work with people who are using the WordPress app in larger and more sophisticated implementations, sometimes there are a couple workarounds that we need to address. But there's no question that having Inbound Writer embedded into your content production and content management systems is absolutely a way to drive adoption within your companies, within your environments. And so whether it's via WordPress, whether it's via our own integration API where we can take our main application and drop it into almost any CMS and workflow for people who are investing in large amounts of content production, that's absolutely the way to go.
Great question. Frank, keep going.
Another question. Does Inbound Writer help with finding better hashtags?
That's a really good question. The explicit answer is no, we don't. But we actually have had a beta product that isn't released that would indeed do that. So that's something that we'd like to do down the line, and it is something we've thought about, because we find same way people are, basically guessing at, well, is this a good topic or not, or is this a good term or not to put in my content, which obviously we leverage our predictive analytics to shed light on that. We find that people are having that same guesswork, that same issue when it comes to promoting their content via tweets, via other social means. And so given that it's a very similar problem, at least looking at it from our perspective, we know that's something that we can also bring to bear and bring to market, and that would be in future products.
I'll add my voice to that one as a request too, Skip. It's interesting. Most of our customers, we publish 3 to 4 blog posts per week for them, and that includes publishing on a set of social channels, Twitter being one of those. And there is an enormous amount of work that's done by a separate team to ensure that the hashtags are correct for that, and finding those is a real trick, actually. So yeah. I'll put my 2 cents on that one. If we were able to write the content and have the hashtags, etc., there as well, and sort of the headlines, would be amazing. So
yeah,
good
we're point taken. It's definitely something we've thought about, and we hope to bring those products to market in the next year or so.
Sounds good. Keep going, Frank. Good stuff.
That is all the questions that I see at the moment. Again, if anyone has questions, you can ask those via the question box in the control panel to the right, or you can indicate a raised hand, and I will unmute your line.
So first off, I want to thank everyone again for spending an hour with us. We know it's summertime, and we know that you guys probably have lots of other things that you could be doing besides hanging out with us. I want to again thank Skip for taking the time today to introduce our audience to an incredible tool. And again, I will put our 2 cents on that. We use this tool exclusively to write our content, and FullQuota has written, as of this morning, about 6,500 blog posts for our customers, and so we use it for a lot of content today. That said, when we've sat down with Skip and we kind of talked about doing this session today, we've partnered together to offer everyone on the call a free audit of your blog content today. And so a couple ways you can do that. So you can either tweet us at our horrible hashtag #GetContentFound. Or in the email that we're going to send to you after the webinar, there's going to be a link to go to a page to sign up for that. There's no obligation, and simply to go let us take a look at it. We're going to use the incredible analytics from Inbound Writer, and we'll come back and give you some really thoughtful ideas about what you can do tomorrow, frankly, to start really performing better from a blog content perspective overall. And so I hope that all of you take advantage of the offer, because it's worth doing. We do it for all of our customers at FullQuota, and I'm telling you, you'll see tremendous benefit from it. So with that, again, I'll thank everyone again. Skip, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you, Reed, and your team, and thanks to everyone on the call. This has been great. Ton of fun.
Thanks again, and again, we'll talk to hopefully everyone who's on the call. We'll see you next month. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.